Our next speaker is the co-founder and CEO of Supercritical, which uses AI to build an accurate measure of an organization's carbon footprint, create a robust climate plan, and remove carbon. Most importantly, those two words, Supercritical sells carbon removal, not carbon credits, which simply move the problem elsewhere. Michelle Yu has been at the forefront of the UK's climate tech ecosystem for some time. She's a former venture partner at Local Globe, where she focused on climate investments, and is a member of Tech Zero, a group of tech companies committed to tackling the climate crisis. A reminder, please do post your questions on Slido. Please welcome Michelle Yu.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm going to be speaking about carbon removal and how we can get it to gigaton scale. So we're one of the world's largest carbon removal marketplaces. As Greg mentioned, we sell carbon removal offsets. And what carbon removal is any form of technology that absorbs carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and actively takes it out and stores it somewhere. So the most well-known technology there are trees. Trees absorb carbon dioxide, store it in their biomass. But we also sell some of the types of technology that you'd see in the pages of Wired, like direct air capture, enhanced weathering. Undo, one of our partners, is speaking at the startup stage later today. Ocean alkalinity enhancement. We kind of cover the range of carbon removal methods. And the fact of the matter is we need to start removing carbon dioxide rapidly in order to stay below 1.5 degrees of warming. So according to the climate science and the latest IPCC reports, even if we decarbonize everything, switch to renewables, electric vehicles, we need to remove 10 billion tons of carbon dioxide annually from the atmosphere by 2050. And this is from a standing start of a few hundreds of thousands of tons. This climate science has now trickled down into policy and guidance around corporate net zero. I want to ask you guys, which of the companies that you work for have made a net zero commitment, either to SBTI or otherwise? Can I see some hands? Great, yeah, amazing. And these commitments are what I see as driving change in climate while we wait for policy and regulation to catch up. But the fact of the matter is every single company that's committed to net zero has to purchase carbon removal offsets to meet their net zero targets. And I think that the way that the carbon markets have worked to date has really held carbon removal back. So the conventional offsets on the market are what's called emissions avoidance. So this is what pays other people to stop emitting. You pay for someone to switch to renewables or a clean cook stove project or protecting a tree and not getting it cut down. But those offsets don't help you as a company get to net zero because you emit a ton, you pay someone to not emit a ton, your ton is still out there warming the planet. In order for your company to hit net zero as you decarbonize and reduce down to your residual emissions, you have to remove an equivalent amount to make a net zero claim. And the challenge that we have is that we need to see 14,000x growth in carbon removal over the next 27 years in order to stay below 1.5 degrees of warming. This is a level of scaling that is intimidating and exciting at the same time, and we need companies to help kickstart the carbon markets and carbon removal in order to get to this gigaton scale. So as I mentioned before, the fundamental flaw we see is in how corporates access carbon offset credits. So the legacy system here is it kind of assumes abundance in carbon offset credits. So it's been around for decades. 95% of the offsets sold today are avoidance credits. And these are projects that have been around, create credits by avoiding emissions, sell them to you, you buy them, and you kind of assume they're there already. Ex post means that the credit has already been delivered. And this shift around buying credits that have been delivered versus future-looking credits is what we really need from buyers in order to kickstart demand. So as I mentioned, the flow is quite linear. You've got a bunch of projects, they develop clean cook stove, protect trees. You come along and say, I want to buy one of these credits, you buy it, and then it happens like in this linear flow diagram. But the challenge is that this flow cannot work for carbon removal because we have a fundamental chicken and egg supply and demand challenge here. So there's a massive disconnect between the tiny limited supply of carbon removal because these technologies are so nascent and early stage and aren't at hundreds of thousands, if not gigaton scale yet, and buyers who want to come online and buy these credits that they're not familiar with, early stage technologies, risky, expensive. And this is the challenge we see around scaling the market. It's a massive, classic chicken and egg challenge, and I would say the chicken and egg conundrum is really exemplified by a vicious circle of the credits are expensive, the technologies are early, they're risky, corporates are reluctant to buy because it's too expensive, they don't understand it, they don't understand how to procure, and then that means a limited demand means that the supply can't get the financing they need to scale. And we can't see the natural scaling that most technologies see of early demand scales up and then the costs come down. And what we see as a way to break through from this chicken and egg challenge is a financial mechanism called an offtake agreement. So an offtake agreement is when a buyer comes to a supplier and says, you haven't built your factory yet, but I will buy your carbon credits in the future when you build it. And this contractual guarantee for the offtake and the revenue is what enables the supplier to go to the bank and say, I have revenue, I have demand, I can sell these credits when you give me the financing, and the bank will then loan them the project financing they need to build their biochar pyrolyzer or the direct air capture facility. This is a different way of buying offsets than what people are used to today. So it's the upfront commitment that enables the supply side to scale. And luckily we have historical precedent for this that has worked to get technologies to scale. Renewables in the form of power purchase agreements got to scale in the same way. So Google, for example, said, if you build your solar farm, I will offtake the next 20 years of your energy, and that enabled the solar farm to get the project financing they needed to build their facilities and get to megawatt scale. Similarly, vaccines saw a similar funding mechanism where in the form of advanced market commitments, countries said, here's $1 billion. If you develop vaccines of a certain quality criteria and pricing, we will buy it. So it's this upfront commitment that really is what carbon removal needs from corporate buyers like yourselves. And there's a lot of market forces very specific to carbon removal that make it attractive for a buyer to engage in this way. So this is a graph produced by BCG around the supply and demand mismatch. So demand for carbon removal is accelerating as all these net zero commitments are materializing. Corporates are realizing, I need to buy 100,000 tons, 500,000 tons, I need to go buy it now. But the supply side isn't building and developing and scaling fast enough to meet this demand. So that means there's this massive disconnect. And as you have supply constraints, as we all know, prices go up. So prices of carbon removal have gone up in the last 2 years. In our example, specifically around biochar, we've seen prices go up by 50%. And this makes buyers even more anxious. But the benefit of an offtake agreement for a buyer is you lock in a price and a cheaper price per ton than what would be available on the market otherwise, like a 50% discount, and you say, I will buy your carbon removal credits in the future at a 50% discount. I'm locking in price, access to supply in a supply-constrained market, and then I'm doing good and creating, having catalytic impact with my purchasing power. So this is the way I see us breaking out of this chicken and egg question of supply and demand. How do we kickstart the market? How do we scale up supply? It's in the form of these offtake agreements. And offtakes really kind of combine the incentives and the motivations between supply and demand and enable us to get to the gigaton scale we need to stay below 1.5 degrees of warming. It's a real win-win for buyers. So you get stable prices locked in at a cheaper discount to what you would be able to buy in the spot market otherwise. You have security of supply in a supply-constrained market, so you can actually materialize your net zero goals and make sure you can hit them. And you have impact in scaling the supply side, so you know you're doing real good in terms of climate impact. And there's a lower risk profile overall because you can have that relationship with the supplier. And for the supply side, your contractual upfront commitment enables them to build their facility, scale up the supply side. And this is like the magic of offtake agreements, and one that we are really proud to work with ambitious early adopters of carbon removal. So I guess the headline for me is, when you walk away, just realize that to hit net zero as a planet and as a company and as a country and as a city, we have to buy carbon removal offsets or enable carbon removal to hit net zero. There's no carbon removal without acting today. Thank you very much.